Our software is called Ignition, and it's an unlimited platform for enterprise integration, industrial applications, and much more. It acts as a central hub for everything on the plant floor and beyond. It's web-based, it's web-managed, and web deployable to desktops, industrial displays, and mobile devices. It has an unlimited licensing model. It's cross-platform. It offers industrial strength security and stability, and it really bridges the gap between OT technology and IT technology. Especially now with Ignition 8.3, more and more IT technologies are able to be brought into the OT arena to offer a lot of value and to make things easier for how to deploy systems at scale. And all of this empowers you to build any kind of industrial application. So whether you need SCADA, MES, IoT, or any other type of solution, just remember that it starts with Ignition. Okay, so let's get into our topic here today around deployment modes, which is a brand new feature in Ignition 8.3. Before we go into that feature in depth, let's start off by quickly describing the challenges that deployment modes was created to solve. So first of all, many organizations today are still doing their development on their production systems. For a lot of organizations, they have one Ignition server at the plant that's connecting to all the plant floor devices, bringing that data in, historizing that data, providing alarms, and providing visualization or applications to various people around the company. And as Ignition being unlimited, they can go into the Designer and they can add new tags, they can add new connections, they can add new projects very easily and get those deployed quickly. And so these systems kind of tend to grow, where Ignition is handling a lot of different kind of projects. And often, of course, those projects at some point become really critical in the operations. So making changes on a production system can be a risky practice because it can easily lead to mistakes, like deleting something important or making a change that negatively affects performance. We've seen it so many times where you accidentally go in there and run a script that was a forever loop, and it caused some CPU to spike or some issues to happen. Or we accidentally delete something, tags or some logic that is really critical to the operations. So you also don't want these systems to go down, right? It's especially critical, for manufacturing, production lines, critical infrastructure, and a lot more. So if your organization is operating this way, what you really should do is introduce a development environment where you can experiment without affecting the live system. However, separating production from development has its own challenges. You don't want the development system to connect to production PLCs or databases. And so each of those environments are going to have different configurations. If you're going to create a development environment, you want that to connect to development databases or development PLCs or simulation PLCs. And then when you go to production, you want that to connect to, of course, the live equipment. So developers have to be aware of the differences in these environments and then carefully move configuration from one environment to another when they're making new changes to prevent development specific configuration from bleeding into production. And that's really the complexity there historically has resulted just a lot of organizations saying, you know what, we're just going to make changes to our production environment and take on that risk. It wasn't really an easy process until now with Ignition 8.3. And that, of course, that issue can compound when you want to add more environments. A typical development process nowadays, we're starting to see a lot more companies go this way, is to have a development system, have a staging or a test environment where they can really test out, full features and make sure things are working in an environment that's very closely related to a production environment, and then move that, of course, to a production system. So before Ignition 8.3, developers had to manage all of these environments manually. They had to migrate changes from one environment to another manually. There's a high degree of domain knowledge. They had to be fully aware of all the configuration differences to avoid causing issues. And it was really an error-prone process. And it got even more complicated when more developers were involved, especially if there are multiple integrators involved or more developers doing different projects at the same time. So having these in separate environments is best practice for modern industrial organizations. So the question really is, how do we best manage separate environments and the differences in Ignition configuration? So as you can see in this picture here, it's nice to have a development environment that's connected to a simulator PLC, a development database. When we go to our staging environment, we have a dedicated test PLC, a dedicated test database, and of course you have the live production system. So how do we take advantage of Ignition 8.3 to accomplish this in a very easy way? Well, that is exactly what we designed the deployment modes feature in Ignition 8.3 to simplify these kinds of multi-environment setups. It does this by allowing the Ignition gateway to automatically adjust its configuration based on the deployed environment, whether that's development, staging, or production, or whatever environment you want to create. It also allows developers to define the configuration differences for each of those environments. So we can actually see in the gateway what the configuration is for each of those environments. You can define those environments and you can specify resources that are specific to each of those environments, as well as, of course, resources that are common to all those environments. So it's a really incredible feature that just simplifies this process and makes it really safe to move from one environment to another. Another major benefit is that it allows developers to commit the entire configuration, including all environment-specific settings, to a version control system like GitHub, and apply the same configuration to multiple gateways in a safe and reliable way. With Git, developers can use branches to isolate experimental features or work on new features without impacting the main application. Developers can also use commits, which are data snapshots of changes that provide a full project history and allow you to revert mistakes with ease. And after you define and committed your configuration, the gateway then ensures it automatically uses the correct context-specific settings based on the mode that it's running in. So to give you a kind of a better look at how the deployment modes works behind the scenes, what you have is a single Ignition configuration that defines all the differences between the environments. So you've got a core set of configuration that's common to all the environments you have. And then for each of the deployment modes, each of those modes, you can have mode-specific resources as well as overrides of the core that allow you to define specifics for that environment. And all of that is defined in one core or one set of Ignition configuration. Each server then is set to a specific mode. So as you can see at the bottom, we have 3 environments: dev, staging, and production. And each of those Ignition servers are defined to use a specific mode. So dev is using the development mode, staging is using the staging mode, and production, of course, is using production. And so what this allows for is safe configuration overrides, where we can define connections as a simulator in the development environment, but as a real, Allen Bradley controller or Modbus connection in the production environment. And that ensures safety and prevents mistakes. So now instead of moving configuration manually from development to production, the standard workflow is to make changes in development environment, push them to a repository where we can merge them into our source control for tracking and then pull them into the appropriate environment. I don't have to worry about pulling just the right things. I can pull the entirety of the configuration because we have that environmental separation defined in that Ignition configuration.